I had no intention of seeing this movie. I was going to skip it, but bizarrely enough my family really wanted to see it. And I said, you know what? It's a DC movie. It's gonna be a mess. It's gonna be a fascinating wreck of a film with an absurdly large budget. And I was not disappointed. The thing that all the DC movies have in common is massive budget. They do absolutely everything wrong, and they have every cliche possible in the movie. Every cliche possible. And I don't have time to go through all of them just because it's so dense. Every frame has so much going on. But to be honest, and as I've said, I prefer the DC movies to the Marvel movies. The Marvel movies are like the blandest, lamest, most uninteresting nonsense. I mean, there's a couple that are like okay. Like I like the Guardians of the Galaxy. I liked uh the second Captain America movie, but most of them are just so lame. Like Doctor Strange, like both of the Avenger movies, like Iron Man 2 and 3, they're just soulless products of a film. This is not a soulless product of a film. This is a complete and utter like disaster of Atlantean proportions. So I was just laughing like half of this movie. It was funny because when I went to Suicide Squad with a friend of mine, there's this scene where they're sitting in a bar, and they're just sitting in the bar, and they like it's completely out of place. Like the world's blowing up around them, they're just ignoring it to have like this bonding moment. And I just started laughing. And I just started laughing hysterically because the movie was so dumb and so bad. And I thought I was going to get kicked out of the movie theater. I was laughing so hard. This wasn't like that, but this was kind of a mess in its own way. So let's try to like unpack this movie. Okay, so Aquaman is played by Jason Momoa, which is an interesting choice for the main character. An interesting choice. Aquaman, my understanding, is like supposed to look like an Aryan Superman. I think he's supposed to be like blonde hair, blue eyed, and they got a Happa to play him. So I was just looking it up. So Jason Momoa is half native Hawaiian and half German. So as with a lot of Happas, he looks very different depending on the camera shot, and you're kind of like your brain's just trying to figure out like what's going on there. So it was an interesting choice. I don't think he was. I don't know, like, because the problem is I just don't know anything with regards to how he's supposed to be played. I thought Ben Affleck took an interesting spin on the Batman character, and I thought Henry Cavill did a really good job with Superman. But I'm more familiar with those two characters, and I have no familiarity whatsoever with Aquaman. So I can't really tell. He kind of just went back and forth with the character. Like, was Aquaman supposed to be retarded? Was he supposed to be smart? Was he supposed to be noble? Was he supposed to be a reluctant hero? Like, the character is supposed to be a bunch of contradictions, but it just comes across as like bad writing and bad editing. This movie was horribly edited. This is one of the worst editing jobs I've ever seen. Like, did I hate the movie? No, it wasn't a bad movie. I had a lot of fun watching it, but it was really lame. Really, really lame. So yeah, so we have Jason Momoa as Aquaman, which is a strange choice. We have Amber Heard as Mira, and Amber Heard is absurdly attractive, so that was a good part of the movie. And we had Nicole. I'm firing my agent Kidman in this movie. Now, as you guys know, I'm a huge fan of Nicole Kidman. I'm always glad to see her. I think she's a good actress. I find her to be one of the most beautiful women alive. So I'm happy to see her in a movie, but she was completely miscast in this film. She didn't belong here. It's surreal to see her in this like this crappy DC movie. I don't know. So let's just stop talking about the casting and let's get into it. So basically, long ago, there were 7 Atlantean kingdoms, including one called Atlantis, which is kind of confusing because how can they all be Atlantean kingdoms if only one of them is Atlantis, and the others are called the Fishermen, and the Deserters, and the Trench, and something else. But no, there's 7 mythical kingdoms, and they had developed a pendulum that converted thought into energy, and they used this pendulum to create a parallel world called Gaia, and they also gave themselves angel wings, and they oh wait, that's a different Atlantis, my bad. Isaac Newton's not in this one, if anyone gets that reference. But yeah, so there's these 7 kingdoms, and they tried to build this like super energy generator, and it exploded, and all the Atlanteans went below the surface, and some of them remained like humans, but who could breathe underwater and were super strong. Others turned into like crab people, others turned into mermaids, and others turned into like Cthulhu abominations. And there's like a random shot of a Lovecraft book in this movie for some reason. I don't really get why it's there. But yeah, so there's the kingdoms, and like some of them are gone, and yeah, that's kind of the backstory. So normally I try to give a fairly detailed summary of the plot and like take you through it narratively, but this movie's like 2.5 hours long, and a lot of it is just kind of like action scenes and stuff. So let me just try to explain the plot as simply as I can. Okay, so Nicole Kidman's character, who's the Queen of Atlantis, Atlanta. Yes, her name is Atlanta. They couldn't come up with anything better than that. Washes up outside of a lighthouse in Maine where she meets Aquaman's father. And there's like some comedic scenes where they're like interacting, and for whatever reason they fall in love, and then they produce Aquaman. But Death Commandos come and take Nicole Kidman back to the ocean. And when she's taken back to the ocean, she's forced to marry her betrothed, who's the king of Atlantis, but she's the queen of Atlantis. So I don't get if they're like married before and then she ran away, or like she got married after she ran away, or she was the heir, but because she's a woman, she can't inherit, so her husband became king. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. But so she goes back, and she has another child with the king of Atlantis named Orm, aka Ocean Master. Only the best names. And they eventually somehow figure out that she had Aquaman with the random guy on the surface. And because of that, she gets sacrificed to the Kraken, aka the Kingdom of the Trench, who are some random Cthulhu-like abominations at the bottom of the ocean. So they know about Aquaman, but they never try to go and kill him, which would be obvious because he's the only other claimant to the throne. But for whatever reason, they don't. So Orm becomes king of Atlantis, and he is an edgelord. Basically, he makes the, in my view, largely correct summation that the surface world has been destroying the oceans through pollution, oil drilling, overfishing, I guess we could say global warming, acid rain. Basically just that the ecosystem of the ocean has been greatly devastated by people from the surface. Oh, also the nuclear tests. And he's like, look, at the way things are going, they're not going to clean up the oceans. Things are just going to get worse and worse and worse. We have to launch a preemptive war. They by basically destroying our cities and our ecosystem and our ability to maintain our livelihoods, that's a de facto declaration of war, which I think is pretty reasonable. I mean, let's think about this for a minute. Let's say Canada dumped toxic radioactive sludge into all of the Great Lakes, contaminating them to the point that they were completely unusable. If America was to see that as an act of aggression or an act of war, I think that would be fairly understandable. Think of any case where like one country would cut off another country's water supply, or like damage their ecosystem irreparably, etc. Like I think Orm's point makes a lot of sense. So he does like a false flag attack where he steals a nuclear submarine, and he's meeting with a king of another group that's not Atlantis but similar to Atlantis, and he has the submarine attack them. So he gets that guy on board. The other king realizes that it's a ploy, but he also wants to attack the surface for similar reasons, because he thinks that the surface is catching up with them technologically, and if they're going to have a war, now is probably the best time to have it. So they but to declare formal war on the surface, they need to have 4 out of the 7 tribes declare Orm Ocean Master, or the Emperor of Atlantis. So they go off to go and like gather the other MacGuffins and get the other tribes on board. But Orm launches a preemptive assault. You know what he does? He grounds all of the world's warships, and he throws all the garbage in the oceans up onto the land. That's his evil terrorist plan. He takes all the garbage in the oceans, he just throws it up on the beaches. He's like, I don't want your crap. Here, land people, take your crap back. It's like, you can't really disagree. He kind of has a point there. Like, they are destroying his civilization and killing his people through pollution. I mean, like I said, he kind of has a point. And it is kind of an act of war. So he starts to get that together. So then they get Aquaman, and Aquaman's like, we have to stop this war. We have to stop the Atlanteans from destroying the surface. So he has to go and get like the mystical trident of the first king of Atlantis. So him and his waifu just like, they're going to sneak in. They're going to talk to William Dafoe. He's got this secret treasure map that's going to lead them to the trident, to the MacGuffin. And once Aquaman gets the trident, everything's going to magically resolve itself. So he goes to Atlantis, and he gets captured by Orm. And Aquaman's like, I challenge you. And then the king's like, you do realize that in Atlantis, you have your right to challenge me for the throne, and if I win, then I get to be king forever. And he's like, yes, I agree to those terms. He's like, are you sure you want to challenge me? And he's like, yes, I challenge you. So then they have a fight to the death, and William Dafoe and Mira are like, this isn't fair. Aquaman is mainly trained to fight on the surface, and they're fighting underwater. This isn't fair to him. This whole match is just wrong. And like, but he agreed to it. I mean, he knowingly agreed to have a death match with his arch nemesis. You think if he had have won, he would have complained that it was unfair? No. So it's a legitimate legal battle. The king let him take whatever armor he wanted. He was able to use his mother's trident. He just got his ass kicked, and then Mira saves him. And I'm like, but he concedes. Like, he concedes the throne. They can't have a rematch. That's not how it works. So he basically just leaves, and then they go off on this big lame adventure to find the trident, and they like go to the Sahara Desert, etc. It's not very interesting. So meanwhile, Orm is getting like this grand coalition of all the undersea peoples together. And there's the fishermen who are like these mermaids, and their belief is that one day they will go up to the surface and they will share their technology and their philosophy with the surface dwellers. And they will, I don't know, be like, they'll get along well. So they just kill the king of that, and they get their army on board. So then they go to invade the brine, who are like these crab people. And they just start killing them, because what better way to start a war against the land people than to slaughter your own people? I mean, I think that's a good idea. But anyways, it turns out that Nicole Kidman isn't dead, and that Jason Momoa goes and gets the trident because the Cthulhu thing likes him for some reason, who's guarding it. So he gets the trident, and he wakes Cthulhu up. So they burst in the middle of the battle, and the thing is, like, okay, so they're fighting on the ocean floor. The brine are like a crab people. They don't really swim. So his like the Cthulhu thing he's writing bursts through the ocean floor and he kills the entirety of the Brine army. He like exterminates like their species and they're the people who he's supposed to be helping because they're getting attacked. So then he uses his like eldritch abomination to just start slaughtering the Atlantean and other allied armies. He probably kills like millions of people in this. And he uses his Aquaman powers to like make their mounts turn on them. So he kills millions of people, and most of these are innocent soldiers. I mean, like they're just following orders. They are taking legal orders from the legitimate king of Atlantis, who was confirmed legitimate king of Atlantis. Well, okay, he's legitimate king because he was of royal birth from two nobility of Atlantis who were legally married, and he beat the only challenger for the throne in a fair duel. So they killed like millions of soldiers who are taking legitimate orders for some reason. I don't know why. And then they have another duel, and this time Aquaman wins. And this time it does count, and he gets to be the new king. The previous time it didn't count because that was earlier in the movie, but this time it did count. And then he declares an end to the war, and then the people love him despite the fact that he probably killed like half the Atlanteans during his little stunt. So then he becomes Aquaman. He takes his red-haired waifu to produce Quappa Atlanteans, and that's the end of the movie. It's long, it's lame, it's every single cliche you can imagine is in this movie. Every cliche. I was actually like mouthing the dialogue before it even happened because it's so just predictable and just so lame. But would I recommend the movie? It's not a bad movie, to be perfectly honest. It is pretty fun. If you're in the mood for just some really, really mindless, mind-bogglingly spectacular popcorn entertainment, not a bad way to spend an evening. So anyways, I'd just like to say this now. Orm did nothing wrong. I'll talk to you guys later.